The history of Italian architecture. Architecture in Italy has changed drastically over the centuries. First, there was the Gothic period, which lasted from the 12th century to the 16th century. After was the Renaissance, which began in the 15th century. Next was the Baroque period, lasting from the 1500s to the 1600s. Lastly is modern-day architecture, which began in the 20th century and goes up to today. Many different styles of architecture can be seen throughout time in Italy, which will be outlined in this video.
Gothic architecture was a style of architecture in Europe that lasted from the mid-12th century to the 16th century. The Gothic architecture is a style of masonry building and is characterized by cavernous spaces with the expanse of walls broken up by overlaid tracery. During the 12th and 13th centuries, an increase in engineering allowed for increasingly large buildings. The ribbed vault, flying buttress, and pointed arch were used as solutions to the problem of building an extremely tall building or structure while preserving as much natural light as possible. Stained glass windows helped to enhance that effect.
Renaissance architecture in Italy is a style of architecture that portrays the rebirth of classical culture that originated in Florence, Italy in the 15th century and spread throughout Europe. The Renaissance replaced the medieval Gothic style and included arches, vaults, and domes. Lurenberg states in an article, as in the classical period, proportion was the most important factor of beauty. Renaissance architects found a harmony between human proportions and buildings. This concern for proportion resulted in a clear, easily comprehended space and mass, which distinguishes the Renaissance style from the more complex Gothic.
Baroque art in Italy was a movement in the late 1500s and early 1600s that was a direct result of the Counter-Reformation. It started in Rome and spread throughout Europe throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. The word Baroque is used to describe architecture, music, sculpture, and other various forms of art that are very extravagant, highly ornate, and very detailed.
Modern architecture generally refers to the architecture from the 20th and 21st century, but also includes contemporary architecture. People commonly mistake modern architecture in Italy with classic buildings such as the Roman Colosseum, the Pantheon, or the Piazza of San Marco. However, this isn't modern architecture of Italy. The late 20th and 21st centuries saw growing trends towards revitalizing cities with modern architecture and urban planning in Italy. Even though Italy already has a large tourist industry, many cities have been tempted to commission star architects to design new iconic buildings. Italian architecture has seen many changes throughout the centuries. These changes began with the Gothic period, characterized by large open spaces. Afterwards came the Renaissance, which was more concerned with proportion than the Gothic style was. In the 1500s, the Baroque period began, which was a result of Counter-Reformation and characterized by dramatic and complex structures that explored the difference between shadow and light. Lastly is the modern-day architecture, which is influenced by globalization, resulting in more modern-looking buildings that we see today. The architecture in Italy will likely to continue to change as time moves on and architects think of new ideas that fit into the era.